let's look at a practical application of graphing and linear equations. So one of the things that really frustrates me is that when you go and you buy oatmeal at a store, you get the dried container of oats, and it'll tell you on the back number of servings, it'll tell you how many cups of water to add for a particular amount of oatmeal. And the thing that bothers me is what if I was a little bit hungrier than 1 cup, but I didn't want, quite 1.5 cups of oatmeal, or if I wanted just a little bit more than 0.5 cups, half a cup, but not quite 1 cup, how do you figure out how much water do you add? Well, what we can do is we can actually look at the relationship between the number of cups of water that we're going to use and how many cups of oatmeal we're going to use. So let's take this as information that we're going to graph. What we're going to do is we're going to determine whether or not this is a linear relationship between cups of oatmeal and cups of water. And we're going to see that if it is a linear relationship, we can actually figure out how much water we can add for any amount of oatmeal that we can consider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a graph. And I'm going to have on my x-axis cups of water, and on my y-axis will be cups of oatmeal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot these data points that I see in this data table on this graph. So let's look at the first one. So for the first one, we can see that I've got 1 cup of water for every half cup of oatmeal. So let's go ahead and make a point. I'm going to use red here. Here is 1 cup of water and half a cup of oatmeal. So for my next point, it's 1.75 cups of water and 1 cup of oatmeal. Now, look at the way that I've incremented my graph here. So every 2 little blocks on this graph paper is 1 cup, which means that between these two is half a cup. And then between the 1 and the 1.5, that would be 1.75. Or sorry, 1.25. Between the 1.5 and the 2 would be 1.75. So what I'm going to do now is to graph the next point. So 1.75 cups of water to every 1 cup of oatmeal. So I'm going to mark that right here. Then for the next one, we've got 2.5 cups of water for every 1.5 cups of oatmeal. So let's go ahead and do that. 2.5 cups of water, 1.5 cups of oatmeal would be right here. And then my last one, we've got 3.25 cups of water and 2 cups of oatmeal. So 3.25 and 2 will place us right here. So again, what I've done is I have now graphed each one of those points from this table on this graph. And it looks like they are, in fact, a straight line. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw that what I call a best fit line through as many of those points as possible. And you can see we've got that right there. So here is the line that we've got based on the data that we've been provided. So now what do we do? Well, what we want to do now is we want to figure out what is the equation for this line. We want to figure out y equals mx plus b for this line. Once we know that equation, we can use that for any amount of oatmeal or any amount of water that we need to make, ourselves breakfast or whatever. So let's go ahead first and figure out what the slope of this line is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to figure out slope. So if you recall, the slope of a line let's write down this actual slope here. So slope, which we give the symbol m, is the change in y over the change in x. So delta y over delta x. This is defined as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So what we've got to do is to figure and pick out 2 points on this particular line, and we're going to use those 2 points to calculate the slope. So let's go ahead and have a look at this line. And what I'm going to do is I am not going to actually use any of the actual data points. When you figure out the equation of a line from data, never use the actual data points you're given. Always pick points on the line, not the data points, even if the data points are on the line. That's really important, and we're going to see that later on this semester. So always, 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 in fact, I'll write that down. Always pick points on the line, not data points. All right, so let's go ahead and let's pick out 2 points. So I'm going to pick out here one point that's, let's see, about, let's do here. And then we're going to pick another point that's about here. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this information to figure out the equation of this line. So this point up here, this is x2, y2, and this point down here is x1, y1. So let's put the values in there. So we'll look at the first point, x1 and y1. It looks to me like the value of x here for this is roughly about 1.5. And the value for y is about 0.75. And again, I'm kind of eyeballing things here. So let's go ahead and write that down. So for x, we said that was about 1.5. And for y, we said that that was about 0.75. And then for x2 and y2, let's take a look here. We've got a value of x2 that is about 3.5 and a value of y2 that's about 2.25. So let's go ahead and write that down. So x2 is about 3.5 and y2 is about 2.25. All right. So now we've got x2, y2, and x1 and y1. Now we can plug our values in and figure out the slope here. So our value for y2 is 2.25, and our value for y1 is 0.75. Now, the y-axis has units on it, which we've got to take into account. That's cups of oatmeal. All right, so let's look at our x values. So x2 is 3.5 minus x1, which is 1.5. And again, our x-axis has units of cups of water. All right, so let's see, 2.25 minus 0.75, that's going to be 1.5 cups of water, sorry, cups of oatmeal. For every, let's see, 3.5 minus 1.5 would be 2 cups of water. All right. Now, what that's telling me is that for every 1.5 cups of oatmeal I make, I'm going to use 2 cups of water. Now, we don't want to leave it like that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get my calculator out here, and I'm going to figure out what this value is. So 1.5 divided by 2 is about 0.75 cups of oatmeal for every 1 cup of water. So this is my slope of this particular line. So now what? Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to use this slope to figure out what the y-intercept is, the value for b in this equation. So let's go ahead and do that. So we know that the equation of the line is y equals mx plus b. So what I want to do now is I want to get that value for the y-intercept. So I'm going to solve this equation for b. I'm going to get b by itself. So I'm going to subtract from both sides mx. So b is equal to y minus mx. Now what I've got to do is I need to substitute a point from my line into that equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this point right here. So my 3.5, 2.5 point. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to bring it down here. And we're going to use that particular point. So I'm going to plug that in. So b is equal to y, which is 2.25, minus m, which we figured out was 0.75, times our value of x, which in this case is 3.5. So if we do that, let's see, you've got 2.25 minus what's in here, so 0.75 times 3.5 is 2.62. And we've got 2.25 minus 2.62 minus 0.37. So that is my value for my y-intercept. So my equation of the line for this, for oatmeal and water, is y equals 0.75 x minus 0.37. And with this equation, I can now figure out, if I want to make a certain amount of oatmeal, how many cups of water am I going to end up adding to it. So let's go ahead and see and apply that to figure this out. So let's say, for example, I want to cook 5.5 cups of oatmeal. How much water would I need? Well, let's use that linear relationship to figure that out. So we've got y equals 0.75x minus 0.37. So remember what the y and the x refers to in this equation. The y refers to oatmeal, or I should say cups of oatmeal, and the x refers to cups of water. So let's go ahead, since we want to figure out how much water is needed, let's solve this equation for x. So if we do that, we're going to first get the term with x by itself. So I'm going to add 0.37 to both sides. So I'm going to end up with, let's see here, 0.75x equals y plus 0.37. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 0.75. So x is equal to y plus 0.37, all divided by 0.75, which is my slope. So let's go ahead and figure out, if we've got 5.5 cups of oatmeal, how much water, how many cups of water we're going to need. So 5.5 cups plus 0.37 divided by 0.75, and the units on my slope, and units are important, it's 0.75 cups of oatmeal per every cup of water. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do my calculator, 5.5 first, plus 0.37. Do that first because it's in parentheses. And then I'm going to, let's see, get that, and I'm going to divide that by 0.75. I get about 7.8 cups of water. And the reason it's cups of water has to do with this. You'll notice that I have cups of oatmeal up here, cups of oatmeal up here. Those oatmeals cancel out. That's going to leave me, after I do my division, with units of cups of water. So if I wanted to make 5.5 cups of oatmeal, I would take, or need, 7.8, roughly about 8 cups of water to do it.